Which NFL teams will make the playoffs? Welcome, football fans. It's Mitch here to let you know if your team is going to make the playoffs and which seed will they be in January. You've come to the right place, because these aren't predictions. No. They're spoilers. These are the teams that are going to make the playoffs. Guaranteed. If that sounds good, Gronk, spike the like button, and don't be a jabroni. Subscribe for more NFL predictions just like this on the Bottom Line View. Get in the comments and let me know, who do you think is going to make the playoffs? These are also not just my playoff teams, but my division winners, my wild cards, and my seeds for the AFC and the NFC based on my predictions for the rest of the season. I didn't just sit here and think off the top of my head. No, I went predictor mode. Game by game, baby. So it's time. We're going to begin in the AFC with the teams that I think will just miss the playoffs. I just don't think these teams are good enough. And I don't project good enough for these teams to make the playoffs for the rest of the season. In the AFC, 3 teams I want to discuss. One of them is really interesting. First, Jacksonville. I don't think we'll make it. I don't think so. They play the Colts twice. They might win one of those games. The Chargers and the Broncos in the AFC West. They might win one of those games. The Cardinals. And then they have 2 pretty easy games, Tennessee and the Jets. If they don't win those games, they have no chance. But overall, 3 pretty winnable games against the Cardinals, Titans, and Jets. Otherwise, 4 teams that are probably better than them on their schedule. The Colts twice and the 2 teams in the West. They definitely need to beat the Chargers this week if they want to make the playoffs, in my opinion. And they need to at least beat the Colts once to have a shot. It's possible they beat the Chiefs. That also helps. But they're too inconsistent at quarterback. Their defense has regressed. Liam Cohen can't keep his head on straight. And I just don't believe in this team. I don't believe in this franchise. I don't believe in this ownership. They've lost Travis Hunter. Brian Thomas is playing inconsistent football. What do they do right now that really scares another team? I feel like, yeah, they started the season strong. Some new flavor to their offensive scheme. Caught people off guard, but they're truly not good enough to make the playoffs. And I wouldn't be shocked if they totally fell off the map in terms of contention. I'm also hoping they don't make it. Nothing against Jags fans. I just don't have any interest in watching Trevor Lawrence in a playoff game. I really don't. The next team that I think will be eliminated, and people aren't going to like this one, the Steelers. I don't think the Steelers are going to win their division. Spoiler alert. I think they will be eliminated from the playoffs. They might win 9 games to save Mike Tomlin's streak, but making the playoffs is a different story. They play the Bengals, which they should win at home, but they already lost to the Bengals. They play the Bears at Chicago, which is a very even game. I think Pittsburgh is a little bit better, especially defensively, but it's in Chicago, and Ben Johnson, he could outcoach Mike Tomlin any day of the week, in my opinion. It's going to come down to Caleb and Aaron Rodgers. I will say, Aaron Rodgers does own the Bears, so that helps. They play the Bills. Good luck. They play the Dolphins at home. They should win that game, especially if it's bad weather. They play at Detroit, which I think is 100% a loss. They play at Cleveland, which is a really difficult place to play and a really good defense, but they did handily beat the Browns in the first matchup. And they play the Ravens twice. And it comes down to, can they win one of these games? I think Baltimore is thoroughly better than Pittsburgh. But what we do know about that rivalry is that it kind of is a split every year. It just is. Pittsburgh plays them really well, specifically plays Lamar really well, but I do personally believe that Baltimore is the much more talented, better team. So if we were to project the Steelers for the rest of the season, I have them finishing with a 9-8 record. And basically what it comes down to me is, can they beat the Ravens? If they can beat the Ravens one time, they have a chance. They have a chance to reach the playoffs. They would hope that the Ravens fall to 9-8 and they finish 10-7. I think that the Steelers at least have to be 10-7 to win this division. So unfortunately, with how Aaron Rodgers looks, with how this defense is playing up and down roller coaster ball, I just can't buy into it. I think they're too inconsistent and they've fallen apart every year in November, December, the last couple years. I'm buying into that again, and I'm saying the Steelers aren't going to get it done. Now, the last team that I think is really interesting that I don't have reaching the playoffs, honestly, just because I think it's too far-fetched, but they actually could pull it off, is the Houston Texans. Now, I picked the Texans to win their division before the season, as many of you did as well. And I could see the Texans going on a run here because they do have the best defense in football. They do match up with a number of these teams fairly well, and their offense has performed better in recent weeks, especially if CJ is healthy. They have winnable games against the Raiders and the Titans left on their schedule. They also play the Cardinals, who are pretty beatable. They also play Indianapolis twice, who is in the division, and if they could beat the Colts once, that would very much help. They play a Bills team at home, who they beat last season. The Chiefs are going to be a really difficult game, and they also play the Chargers in LA, but remember, they beat the Chargers in the playoffs last year pretty handily in Houston. Can they do that again? I actually have the Texans finishing with 10 wins, which might seem crazy because I think they're 4-5 as I talk about them right now. But I have them beating every team on their schedule except for the Chiefs and Colts one time. So I think it's very possible that they could pull off a 7 seed. But they definitely have to beat the Chargers. Like 100%. They have to beat the Chargers for them to even have a chance. If they lose to the Chargers, I think it's all over because the Chargers are the team that I think they might be able to surpass. They need to beat the Colts once, which would very much help, and they need to beat the Bills or the Chiefs, which I think is possible, especially considering they beat the Bills last year, and they played the Chiefs twice last season, so they're very familiar with them. But they have to win the games they should win, like Tennessee, the Cardinals, the Raiders. I expect them to win those games, especially being that 2 of them are at home, and the other one that's on the road is against the Titans. So as long as they do that, I actually think the Texans are a team that might be even more likely than a team like Jacksonville, who currently has the better record, and I have them finishing with the better record on the season. So those are the teams in the AFC that I don't have reaching the playoffs, but there's potential there for it to happen. Now we're going to go to the 7 seed and work our way up the AFC. So the team that I have as the 7 seed is the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, the Chargers could potentially lose their spot, as I pointed out, to most likely the Texans. Now, keep in mind that they beat the Steelers, which is ginormous, because now the Steelers have very little chance of squeaking in as a wild card team because the Chargers won that game. But they do play the Texans, and they do play the Jags. So depending on the results of those games, they could still lose their spot because I think they're about to go on a little bit of a losing streak. I do think they play a lot of good teams. I mean, I think they will beat the Jags, but I actually think they will lose to the Texans. So those are potential split scenario right there. Maybe they beat the Texans and lose to the Jags. I'd be pretty surprised if they beat both of the teams, but let me know what you think in the comments. They will beat the Raiders. I know that. Okay, so I'm not worried about that. They will beat the Raiders. But that's the only easy game they play. They play at Kansas City. They beat them already. I don't expect them to sweep them. They play at Denver in the cold late in the season as a dome Los Angeles warm weather team. Now, I know that they own the Broncos, and I'd give them the slight edge because of that, but the strength of the offensive line currently for the Chargers against one of the best pass rushes in football in the Broncos in the cold, that scares me a lot. I think they might lose that game. So at Kansas City, at Denver, Dallas is a really challenging game. At Dallas, that's a really good offense with a very much improved defensive line. And Dallas is going to be interesting at the end of the year. I don't think they can beat Philadelphia. So they play Philly, Kansas City, Denver, Dallas, Jacksonville, and Houston. That's a really difficult schedule. I have them currently finishing with 11-6 or 11-6 as a record, which is honestly pushing it. Like, I could see them, I have them beating Dallas, I have them beating Denver, I have them beating Jacksonville and Las Vegas. But considering their current record, right, they already have 7 wins. So all they really need to do is go 4-3 down the stretch. And I feel like that's fairly reasonable. Is it not? I feel like that's fairly reasonable. But the offensive line will make or break the ability to do that. Okay? So that's the Chargers as my number 7 seed. The next team that I have in the AFC wild card is the Denver Broncos. I have as the 6th seed. Okay? So the Broncos play 2 really easy games. At Washington, at Las Vegas. There's almost no chance in no world do I believe they will lose those games. Now, they nearly lost to the Raiders, but I think that's the one close game against the Raiders that they will have, okay? Gotta watch out, though, because this Denver team is a liability to me because against anybody, they just may not be able to score enough points, which keeps the back door open for any team against them, okay? Keep that in mind. They almost lost to the Jets. They almost lost to the Giants. They've almost lost to a lot of bad teams this year, but somehow found a way to win. But consider this. They play Kansas City twice. They play Green Bay, Jacksonville, and Los Angeles. So I have them finishing 12-5, which means they'll lose 3 games. I have them losing to the Chargers, which I said is a little suspect. I'm not sure. I have them losing to the Chiefs 1 time and beating the Chiefs 1 time. I have them losing to the Packers. So I have them losing 3 games, Packers, Chiefs, and Chargers. That would allow them to finish 12-5 as long as they beat the Raiders, the Commanders, and Jacksonville, and then the Chiefs once. Which, again, not even those games are really easy. But looking at this schedule, I think the Broncos have built up a nice resume so far at 8-2 based on playing a lot of bad teams and beating those bad teams. But it's hard for me to trust Bo Nix. It's hard for me to trust the offense in its current state. The defense is really good and will only get better when Pat Surtain is healthy. I love Sean Payton and Vance Joseph. Very well coached team. But with their offense, I just feel like they're more susceptible to an upset than a lot of other teams are in the AFC, period. Okay? So that's why I have them at the 6th seed. My 5 seed is the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills, I actually have finishing 13-4, but I could also see them at 12-5. Either way, I have them as the 5 seed. Now, what this means if I have them at 13-4, it means that they only lose 1 more game. And the 1 more game that I could see them losing, I'm not really sure. I actually picked it to be the Texans at Houston. I do have them this week beating the Bucs, which is a possible loss. I do have them going to New England and winning, but that's a possible loss again. And I do have them beating the Eagles at home, but that's also a possible loss. So any one of those 4 games, I think they will lose. And more likely than not, given how they've played so far, they probably will lose 2 of those games. So if they did lose 2 of those games, then they would still be the 5 seed based on my math. So just keep that in mind. If they were 12-5, but if they are 13-4 like I initially predicted, then they'll still be the 5. It doesn't really matter because the Patriots will have a better record than them. So it's a little bit of a spoiler for what the Patriots are going to be. But the Bills at Pittsburgh, I think they'll win and take care of that. The Bengals, they have no defense. The Browns, they have no offense. The Jets, they stink. That's 4 free wins. 4 free wins for the Bills. Right? They already have 6, so that's 10. Then for the rest of the year, they got Tampa at home, who still have a beat-up offense. The Eagles, it's going to be a really tough game, but it's in Buffalo, and it's likely to see snow, and the Eagles' offense has been very much up and down all year. The Texans, I think, are a really tough matchup for them, but then again, the Texans' offense is spotty each week, and New England is a really tough matchup for them, but they already lost to New England, and the likeliness they get swept by New England is fairly unlikely. So I actually think we're kind of underrating the Bills for the rest of the year. I think that a lot of people are being too dramatic about Buffalo. When you look at the schedule, it's very serviceable for them to still pick up 12, 13 wins. The problem is New England is probably not going to lose very many games from here on out. The 4 seed, as you know, I don't have Pittsburgh making the playoffs. And I don't have the Bengals as the 4 seed. I have the Ravens as the 4 seed. Here's the thing with the Ravens, okay? Their schedule is half easy, half hard. They need a minimum of 9 wins to make it, but more than likely they need 10, as I mentioned with Pittsburgh. So I have them losing to the Steelers and to the Patriots. But they could lose to the Patriots or the Packers. It doesn't really matter, right? So they play the Patriots and the Packers back to back. They play the Patriots at home. They play the Packers in Green Bay. Either way, okay, it doesn't matter. Either way, they win the division at 10-7. They just can't lose to Pittsburgh, Green Bay, and New England. As long as they only lose 2 of the 3, they'll be okay, and they'll make the playoffs. Okay, so I have them beating the Browns, beating the Jets, and beating the Bengals. Feels pretty easy, right? Then it comes down to those Pittsburgh, New England, Green Bay games. And like I said, I don't think they'll lose to both New England and Green Bay. I think they're going to win one and lose the other. Some may say, hey, they'll lose to Green Bay at Lambeau. That's fair. Some may say, hey, New England, Mike Vrabel, Drake May, that's a tough matchup for the Ravens. I could see them losing that game. Fair enough. Whatever. Okay? But I do think that they'll lose to Pittsburgh once just because that's the way it goes. That's the way the game is played. It's the black and blue rivalry. Mike Tomlin, he prepares for Lamar, as mentioned, really well. Okay? And they're going to be fired up. But could they sweep the Steelers? Very possible. Would it really matter? Not necessarily, because I don't see the Ravens winning 12 games. So if they don't win 12 games, there's no chance of them being the 3 or the 2 or the 1. So the Ravens, basically, if they make the playoffs, they're most likely to be the 4 seed without any movement. So they're pretty much hosting one playoff game, and they're going to be on to the second round, potentially, if they win the first round. So, and the Ravens are a dark horse team because they certainly have the elements of being that, right? A team that everybody looked at as a favorite, super talented, great quarterback, winning coach, winning culture, and they've underwhelmed for the first half of the year. But then they go on a run at the end of the year. This is how 7 seeds and 5 seeds and 6 seeds have won Super Bowls in the past, okay? That's how it's done. That formula, okay? But it's easy competition. Bengals, Jets, Cleveland, 3 free victories. Then it comes down to the rest of the schedule, okay? And and they play the Bengals twice, by the way. And I think they will sweep the Bengals. Now, I guess that's not 100% certain that they will sweep a division foe. But given the state of the Bengals defense, considering they also swept the Bengals last year, considering Joe Burrow probably won't be there for at least one of the games, if not both, I think the Ravens will sweep the Bengals. Okay? So, not else has to be said here. I'm hoping the Ravens make it over the Steelers. They're more of a threat to get to the Super Bowl. They're more of a threat for the AFC. I want to see the King in the playoffs. I want to see Lamar in the playoffs. I want to see the secondary that I think's shaping up in the playoffs. So I have the Ravens at number 4, and I think it's very realistic. My number 3 seed is the Indianapolis Colts. I think they'll fall off just slightly, but still finish as a top 3 seed. So, they have a bye right now. After the bye is the game for the Colts. The Colts play the Chiefs at Kansas City. That is the game that will determine if they're the 2 or the 3, or maybe even the 1. But the Colts play a really difficult stretch at the end of the year that I think will hold them from being the top seed. They play Jacksonville in division twice. They play Houston twice, both divisional foes. It's very difficult to sweep a divisional foe. I have them going 3-1 in those games. So that's even giving them the benefit of the doubt, only losing 1 of 4 games against the other top 2 teams in your division, with one of them having the best defense in the NFL, okay? And then the other 3 games are really tough. At Kansas City, at Seattle, and then the Niners, who are not an easy team and a potential playoff team. And like I said, I think that Chiefs game kind of dictates whether they're the 2 or the 3. But since it's at Kansas City, I'm leaning Chiefs that game. I do think they can win that game. I think it's very possible JT could run over the Chiefs. Lou Anarumo could pull his bag of tricks against Mahomes. It's very possible they could win that game. But given the potential environment, the weather, the Chiefs' defense maybe rising to the occasion under Spags, Patrick Mahomes in a big moment versus Daniel Jones, I lean Chiefs. I do. I think going to Seattle's really tough. I actually think Seattle's a really tough matchup for the Colts because Seattle is so good against the run, and Seattle's front is so physical and big, and I think that would be a really tough matchup. So I definitely see them losing to Seattle. I think the Chiefs will be really tough. I do have them beating the Niners just because I don't think the Niners defense can slow down the Colts in Indianapolis. I just don't think so. Maybe the Niners could beat them in a shootout. It's possible, but I think the Colts will start to be getting into form in their secondary, a little bit healthier. Sauce Gardner, right? I think the Colts are just a healthier team. That should be a very fun game, but I would go with the Colts. So I have them finishing 12-5. And when you look at the Colts, right, they haven't played a lot of great teams. They've been benefiting from an easy schedule, but it gets a lot more difficult after the bye, right? They beat the Falcons. They beat the Titans twice. They beat the Cardinals, the Raiders, right? The Dolphins. Not a lot of very good teams. They have beaten a couple impressive teams. They've hung in there with the Rams. They lost to them. They beat the Broncos. They beat the Chargers. Okay, some decent teams they beat. But now is really the test. Kansas City, Seattle. Those are real tests. So the Colts I have at 12-5 just because of the schedule I think is really tough. Okay, and then my 2 seed is obviously the Chiefs. The Chiefs can't be the 1 seed. They just have too many losses. It's just very difficult. They would have to win every game for the rest of the year potentially to do that. And I have them nearly sweeping the rest of their schedule. And the rest of their schedule is difficult. I mean, the Chiefs, I have my reputation on the line here. I'm a Chiefs hater. And I have the Chiefs as the 2 seed, guys. And I think the Chiefs could miss the playoffs given this schedule. It's possible. If the Chiefs slip up, they could miss the playoffs. But I have them as the 2 seed. Guys, they play Denver twice. They play Indy. They go to Dallas on Thanksgiving, I believe, Thanksgiving. It might be Christmas, but I think it's Thanksgiving. Houston, that's not easy. The Chargers, that's not easy, right? They got 2 really easy games, Tennessee and the Raiders. So mark those down as victories. So that's up to 7 wins, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're 5-4 right now. I think. Are they 5-4 or whatever they are? I don't know what they are. Anyways, but I have them beating the Broncos 1 time, so losing 1 of them. That's the only game I have them losing. So I have them beating the Colts at home. I have them going to Dallas and winning. I have them beating the Texans at home. I have them beating the Chargers at home. And that's what helps this stretch. They're all at home, except for Dallas. And Dallas has a flawed defense. Dallas is the most flawed team they play, and it's on the road. And then they play Tennessee and the Raiders on the road. But all these other games are at Arrowhead. The Colts, the Texans, the Chargers. And the Chargers have a flawed offensive line. They're not as good as the team or as talented as the team that beat them in week 1. The Texans have a flawed offense and a flawed offensive line going to Arrowhead. The Colts, like I said, I don't really love the cold environment at home, big moment, all that sort of stuff. So they'll probably lose the Broncos 1 time. They might lose 1 more game, maybe to the Colts or the Chargers. I don't think the Chargers will sweep them, though. So I honestly think they'll only lose a max of 2 more, honestly. But it's possible, given their schedule, that they could fall 3 more. I mean, and then maybe they miss the playoffs at 10-7. It's very possible. So they can't afford to lose 3 more games. So it's a weird one. I know it's a bold one because the Chiefs, yeah, they're the Chiefs, but at the same time, they've already have 4 losses. So, but I have them as the 2 seed based on that schedule. And then my 1 seed is the Patriots. The Patriots, maybe or maybe not, they're the best team in the AFC. But you look at their schedule, guys, and it's just too easy. You could say they're 13-4. You could say they're 14-3. Regardless, they'd be the number 1 seed. I have the Colts at 12-5. I have the Chiefs at 12-5. Right? I have the Bills at 13-4, but if the Patriots only beat them just once, then they're still going to have the division. They already beat them one time. Right? So it's very difficult for the Bills to surpass them in the division. Looking at the Patriots, okay? The Patriots play the Jets twice, the Bengals, the Giants, Miami. I mean, the only competitive games they play are at Baltimore, which I said they could definitely win, and versus Buffalo. If the Patriots are as good as I think they are, they might only lose 1 game. Like, if they might be frauds if they lose both Baltimore and Buffalo. Because the rest of the year, they don't play anybody. Maybe they slip up and they lose to the Bengals or they lose to the Giants. It's possible. It happens in the NFL, but it's unlikely given the state of those teams. The Jets, they play 1 on the road, but they play this Thursday night at home. That's a primetime spot. Probably not going to lose that game. Jets in New York, it's tricky to some degree. It's a divisional foe on the road, but still, they're terrible, right? They've traded players. Miami at New England in the cold in December. That's an easy win. The Bengals, they play them in Cincinnati, so it's a little bit trickier. We'll see if Joe Burrow's back for that game. That might be the slip-up game. They play a Monday night game at home against the Giants, which people can say what they want about Jackson Dart, Jameis Winston, whatever. At Monday Night Football, New England Patriots at home against a bad team, they should win that game. So really, truly, I think they only lose 1 more game. And I think they are the number 1 seed in the AFC. Whether you think they're the best in the conference or not, it really doesn't matter. That's just their schedule, okay? Now let's translate to the NFC. Let's transition, guys. And if you haven't already, Gronk, spike the like button. All right, let's talk about the teams that just missed the playoffs. First of all, a team that I think a lot of people are going to be intrigued by, the Chicago Bears. I think the Bears are really going to struggle for the rest of the season. They're 6-3. But if I told you that I think they could only win 2 more games for the rest of the year, would you think I'm crazy? Let me tell you their schedule. At Minnesota this week, Pittsburgh at home, at Philly, at Green Bay, Cleveland at home, Green Bay at home, San Francisco, at San Francisco, and Detroit. I have them losing to Detroit. I have them losing to San Francisco. I have them losing to Green Bay at least once, if not both times, because the Packers kind of own them. I think they'll beat the Browns. Aaron Rodgers also owns them. The Vikings, I already picked the Vikings this week, and I have them losing to the Eagles. So they might win 2 more games. They might win 1 more game. They might win 3 more games at most. Either way, they're probably a max of 9-8. And that would be a good season if you're a Bears fan. Look at that schedule and tell me where they're winning their games. I just don't see it. Their defense is atrocious. This is probably the most overrated team based on their record left in the NFL. At 6-3, they're nowhere near the quality of 6-3. They've beaten a bunch of bad teams barely. The Raiders, barely. The Commanders, barely. The Saints, by turnovers. The Bengals, barely. The Giants, barely. This is just not a good enough team to make the playoffs. Now, the other team that I think is captivating is the Cowboys. I have them missing the playoffs, but it's possible they make it and maybe surpass a team like the Niners. That being said, though, the Cowboys' schedule is really difficult and much more difficult than the 49ers. By the end of the year, it wouldn't shock me if the Cowboys were better than the Niners, but they just didn't make it because they already lost too many games. The Niners have a lot of injuries. The Cowboys might be peaking near the end of the season, but they do play a lot of difficult teams, including the Chargers, the Lions, the Chiefs, and the Eagles, okay? But I have them beating the Raiders. I actually have them beating the Eagles. I think the Eagles will lose one or two more games left. Dallas nearly beat them in week 1. It's a divisional game. It's at home. I think Dallas can win that game. So I have them beating the Eagles and the Raiders. I have them losing to the Chiefs and the Lions. I have them beating the Vikings, losing to the Chargers, beating the Commanders and the Giants. So I think that's fairly reasonable. Winning the games in the division and beating the Raiders, essentially, and beating the Vikings at home, which don't have a quarterback. So I have them at 8-1. If they would have beat the Packers, they would have been 9-1. Now, if they could beat the Chargers at home, who's like a good, but kind of mid, then they're 9-7-1. Okay. If they could maybe upset the Chiefs on Thanksgiving or beat the Lions on a Thursday night, now we're talking. So the Cowboys, it's possible. It's possible. I think they definitely have 4 games on their schedule that I think they're definitely better than those teams. The Vikings, the Commanders, the Giants, and the Raiders. So it's possible for the Cowboys, but they would have to upset probably multiple teams, including the Chargers, the Lions, the Chiefs, and the Eagles. And they would have to hope the Niners kind of fall apart. That's their best chance. But I do have them missing based on the odds, based on the likeliness of them getting those wins. Okay? So let's get to the 7 seed, which I think is kind of obvious. I have the 49ers as the 7 seed. At Arizona, I think is a coin flip game this week. I picked the Niners, but they could lose that game, and I wouldn't be surprised. I do have them beating the Panthers. I do have them beating the Browns in Cleveland, although if they beat the Cardinals and lost to the Browns, it wouldn't surprise me very much. Kyle Shanahan, for whatever reason, has struggled with Jim Schwartz, and the game that they played in 2023 where the Browns won, it does stick in my brain a little bit. I could see the Browns winning that game with their defense at home. It's possible, and given the state of the Niners' defense, any offense could move the ball against them. I do have them beating the absolute crap out of the Titans. I have them losing to the Colts. I have them beating the Bears because of the Bears' defense, and I have them probably losing to Seattle, but they could win that game based on the circumstances. It's also at home, which does help. But I have the Niners either way, no matter how you slice it, at 10-7. I think that's pretty fair. The Niners, I think they could actually be a very fun team for the rest of the year. Brock Purdy's expected to return. Ricky Pearsall is coming back. Brandon Ayuk probably will come back at some point. In that case, they could have a very elite offense and arguably the best passing offense in the league. This year, they've regularly been throwing for 300 yards, and they're going to have to do that with the current state of their defense. But with the defense maybe youthful, getting a little bit better, getting a little bit more in sync, even without Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, given who they have as their coaches, Shanahan and Saleh, this is a team that no one wants to see in the playoffs. They could game plan and just out-effort a team in the first round, and it wouldn't be shocking. If the Niners were the 7 seed and went to Philadelphia and won, I don't think anyone would really be that surprised. If San Francisco went to Detroit in the playoffs and won, I don't think it would be that surprising because of what Kyle Shanahan has proven in the past, and he's literally never, ever been to the playoffs and not reached the divisional round. So it's possible. I wouldn't want to see the Niners in the first round, but I definitely think they will reach the playoffs. I do. So they're my 7 seed. And then the 6 seed I do have is the Packers. So the Packers, they have a reasonable schedule, but it will certainly test them. The Giants should be a win. They play the Bears twice. They should probably beat the Bears twice. They play the Vikings twice, and they should probably beat the Vikings twice. Honestly, they probably should, right? So depending on what happens, they could win their division. They very well could. The Lions have a more difficult schedule remaining, but the Packers, I I could see them losing to the Ravens. I could see them losing to the Broncos. I think they'll probably lose one of those games. Denver or Baltimore. Denver or Baltimore. I do have them losing to the Lions, and it's probable that they lose to the Packers or to the Vikings. So in that case, they'll be around 11-6, maybe 10-6-1. It does help that they have a tie, which would give them the edge over the Niners in a 7-6 scenario. If it even matters that they're the 6 and not the 7. It depends on who they want to play. But either way, I have them around 10-11 wins, the Packers, and that would give them the 6 seed. I think the Packers have been disappointing. I picked them to make the playoffs and reach the Super Bowl before the season. I had them as the NFC representative for the Super Bowl. I was all in once Micah Parsons was traded for. I really was right about the defense. I feel like the defense has lived up to its potential, but what hasn't lived up to its potential is Matt LaFleur. I think he's had a down season. Josh Jacobs in the run game and the offensive line improvements have not turned into a good running game. Their lack of just ability to use Matthew Golden and Christian Watson within the offense. Tucker Kraft broke out like I expected, but then got injured. So they've had some key injuries like Tucker Kraft, and now Elton Jenkins also pretty significantly injured. So the Packers probably aren't a significant threat once they reach the playoffs because their offense is so kind of up and down and their defense is good, but I feel like there are susceptibilities at the corner position. So the Packers probably aren't in that absolute contender status, but they would have to get a lot healthier. And maybe with all their offensive pieces minus Tucker Kraft, they could threaten, but I'm not loving what I'm seeing right now from them. But I definitely think they make the playoffs at 10-6-1, 11-6-ish, wherever you land there. The 5 seed. I have the Seattle Seahawks, and this was difficult because the Seahawks could win their division and be the 1 seed, potentially. And Seattle being a 1 seed is always fun. Seattle primetime playoff games are awesome. I love watching them. Maybe I'd even go to one. I'm not that far away. But Seattle has an easier schedule, I would say, than the Rams. It's pretty close, I guess. They play the Colts, and the Rams have already beaten the Colts. That does help. But Seattle, I think it's going to come down to the games against LA, Indy, and San Francisco. So I have them beating the Rams once and losing to the Rams once. I think that's pretty fair. They should be able to beat the Titans and the Vikings at home, given how flawed those teams are. The Vikings are tough in some aspects, but I don't believe in JJ. Tennessee's terrible. At Atlanta could be a spoiler spot. And that's actually one of those where I'm like, Seattle feels like a team that's going to slip up and lose one of these games. Whether it be like Carolina or Atlanta, they got to go to both of those teams on the road in the NFC South. I could see them losing one of those games. And I picked Atlanta. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's their pass defense, pass rush, the potential of Atlanta offensively. Bijan, Drake London. I feel like they could be an upset. They beat the Bills at home. I feel like it's possible they could beat Seattle. So I do kind of feel like Seattle is going to drop one game that's surprising. Whether it be Atlanta, San Francisco. Indy wouldn't really be surprising, but they still have to play them. So I only have them losing a couple more games. The Rams will be one of them, and then pick your poison on the other. Whether it be the Colts, the Panthers, the Falcons, the Niners, the Vikings. Those are all games that they could lose in some way, shape, or form. But I have them at 13-4, finishing as the 5 seed. I think they're a legitimate threat no matter where they finish as a seed because they're dominant on defense. They've got a great defensive line. They're elite against the run. They've got a great mastermind defensive coach in Mike McDonald. They're proven on the road. And I almost feel like they'd rather be on the road than at home in the playoffs, playing more of that underdog role. They've been great on the road last year and this year. Sam Darnold's played really, really well. I think what they need is they need to get more out of Shaheed or Kupp or that secondary option within the passing offense. And then they need to run the ball more efficiently and effectively and they need to be able to drop back and throw the ball in key clutch scenarios. They can figure those things out. They could reach the Super Bowl. It's very possible with their defense and their track record on the road. And you know that Seattle in the playoffs would be hectic. So, I have Seattle as the 5, but it's possible they finish as the 1 or the 2. It is very possible. Okay, number 4 seed, I have as Tampa, and this kind of comes down to a tiebreaker. I have Tampa losing the tiebreaker to Detroit because they lost to Detroit. So Tampa Bay also hurts that they lost to New England. I have them losing the next 2 games to Buffalo and the Rams on the road, which I think is fair. But then I have them winning the rest of the games. Now, I also think I have them as the 4 rather than the Lions as the 4 because it's probably improbable that they sweep the rest of their schedule after they lose to the Rams and the Bills, especially considering all their injuries, no Mike Evans, all that sort of stuff. Like, they could very much lose one of the games against Carolina or one of the games against New Orleans or Atlanta. Like, the divisional games. It's going to be unlikely that they sweep 4 more divisional games. It's probably unlikely, right? That would mean that they would sweep the entire division for the entire season. So it's more likely that they finish 11-6, and let's say they lose to Atlanta on Thursday Night Football, and then all of a sudden they're 11-6. But either way, it doesn't really matter. They'd win their division by a long shot. They're the 4 seed. It doesn't really have a huge impact. Even if they do win that game, let's say, against Atlanta, or they do beat the Panthers twice, or whatever it may be, they would be 12-5 and still probably lose out to the Lions as the 3 seed because the Lions beat them earlier in the year. So Tampa is a threat, though. It comes down to Todd Bowles' ability to get the most out of this defense. The defense has immense potential. I love their secondary. I've talked at length about it consistently. Love McCollum, and Dean's playing the best ball of his career. I love the rookies, Morrison and Parrish. I think Winfield's balling. Levante David, Vita Vea. It does suck that Kalijah Kancey won't return. Hassan Reddick needs to get healthy for their edge rush. That would be nice. The defense needs to kind of carry them throughout the rest of the year, but I think they can. Offensively, they need to get healthy. If they can get all their receivers with Bucky Irving in the backfield, even if they have a couple injuries on the offensive line, this is a big-time dark horse threat that has plenty of championship experience, that has a very good playoff quarterback, that's a gamer that can make plays inside, outside the pocket. Mike Evans, Emeka Ibuka, Chris Godwin, Cade Otton, Rashad White, Bucky Irving. There aren't many stables of weapons that are more dangerous than Tampa. So Tampa has a really well-rounded team, a team that I feel like could go on the road, a team that I feel like could win at home. I think Tampa could be a real big dark horse in the playoffs. My 3 seed is obviously, as mentioned, the Detroit Lions. I have them at 12-5. Their schedule, though, is pretty tough. And they could even lose the division to Green Bay if they're not careful. But I do think that the Lions are just the more consistent team, franchise, quarterback, offense, all of it. So I have them as the 3 because they're more reliable. They typically beat the teams they're favored to beat. Okay? So when you look at Detroit, they lost to the Vikings already, which does hurt. I do have them losing to the Eagles, but they could win that game. I have them beating the Giants. I have them beating the Packers and evening up that season series. That is a critical game, though. If they lose to the Packers, they probably will lose the division because that would be 2 games they had lost to the same team who is their rival to win the division. I have them beating the Cowboys, although that won't be easy, but it is at home on a Thursday. I have them losing to the Rams, which would be critical in a matchup to get the 1 seed. If the Lions can beat the Rams, that would go a long way in them getting the home field advantage in the NFC playoffs. But I do have them losing on the road at LA. I have them beating the Steelers. I have them beating the Vikings and the Bears. And I feel like that's pretty reasonable. So that means they would even up with the Vikings. I don't see them getting swept by the Vikings. That would mean they swept Ben Johnson, which I think is fair. And I think they'll beat the Steelers pretty easily. But yeah, the big games are the Rams, the Eagles, the Packers. I only have them winning 1 of those games. The other games are games they'll be favored in, and I expect them to win all those games. I don't think the Lions are a juggernaut this year. I think there's things about their coaching that isn't quite the same. I feel like the offensive line isn't quite the same. I feel like the offensive rhythm It might get its spark back with Dan Campbell calling plays, but it isn't quite the same. It's still good. It's just not phenomenal, elite, historic. And then defensively, I think they're good, but they're not great. I just think the Lions are a step below the Rams and the Eagles, and I think they're kind of on that Seattle-Tampa tier. But that's just kind of how I see them right now. I could change my mind. We'll see how the offense performs for the rest of the year. It just feels like when they've gone up against the Chiefs, when they've gone up against the Packers already, they have lost those games. And I need to see the rest of the schedule and how they fare against those caliber teams. My 2 seed is going to be a team that I haven't really mentioned much of, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champs. So I don't have them as the 1 seed, but the same as last year, the 2 seed, right? They were the 2 seed last year, if I'm not mistaken. So I have them as the 2 seed. So I have them losing to Dallas, as I mentioned already, and I have them losing at Buffalo in Week 17. I think Buffalo will probably have to do with the weather and the Bills trying to pursue the AFC East. While the Eagles probably won't have to win that game, it probably won't have to be a big deal. But the rest of their schedule is really serviceable. It's really easy. The Detroit game is pretty tough, obviously. So if you think they'll lose to Detroit, maybe they beat the Cowboys, or they lose to the Cowboys. Maybe they lose 2 straight, and then they beat the Bills. Either way, I think they probably only lose 2 more games. They play the Bears at home on Black Friday, I think it is. They play the Chargers on the road on a Monday night. Not an easy game, but I think they match up pretty well in that game. The Raiders at home is an easy win. The Commanders twice are easy. So at least 3 to 4 free victories. And then they just got to take care of business a couple more times to get this number 2 seed. It also does help that they've beaten all the top teams they've played so far. They beat the Rams. That really does help. The Bucs, that really helps. The Packers, that really helps. If they could beat the Lions, that would really help. If the Eagles do beat the Cowboys and they go 13-4, then they go 14-3. I have them at 13-4. If they could beat the Cowboys or beat the Bills, they would be the 1 seed again. Okay? So, because they beat the Rams. But because I have them at 13-4, I have the Rams as the 1 seed. But if the Eagles can find a way to be 14-3, they would be the 1 seed. And when I look at the Eagles, I think they're a Super Bowl threat. I think they're truly a Super Bowl contender. They proved it last year. I'm a little worried about the coaching come playoff time and the lack of adjustments. I think they might get caught. I look at them from an offensive perspective and feel like they stagnate too much, and that might kill their playoff hopes. But I think their defense is going to be the side of the ball that carries them, and I do believe that they have enough individual talent offensively that in any given game they could beat any given opponent. But that coaching on offense and the consistency of the offense in Jalen Hurts might hold them back from a back-to-back championship. Los Angeles is my number 1 seed to close out this video and predictions. I have them at 14-3, which means they only lose 1 more game, and it will be the Seahawks at Seattle. Otherwise, I have them beating the Seahawks once, the Bucs at home, which I feel like McVay kind of owns Todd Bowles. I have them sweeping the Panthers, the Cardinals, the Falcons, and the Cardinals again, and beating Detroit. That being said, if you're an Eagles fan thinking about this and seeing this, if you're a Lions fan thinking about this and seeing this, could they lose to Seattle once? Very likely. Could they lose to Detroit? Very possible. They've lost to Detroit, 3 times in a row? Very possible. So if you're an Eagles fan saying, hey, Mitch, I think they're going to go 13-4, not 14-3, I understand. I just think this is the best team in football right now, and I think they're only going to lose 1 more game. I just think they're that good. I think Stafford's on a heater, and I think this could be his MVP season if it's not Drake Mays. So those are my predictions, guys. the NFC seeds, the AFC seeds. Let me know yours in the comment section below. It's Mitch. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.